So Dr. Gabaldon, bachelor's degree in zoology, master's in marine biology,
Yes.
doctorate in quantitative behavioral ecology.
Yes, that's animal behavior with a lot of statistics. Don't worry about it.
You were or are a very serious scientist, professor at ASU with expertise in scientific computation. And you were the founding editor-in-chief of Science Software Quarterly.
It was.
And then you took a slight detour to become one of the world's most admired novelists writing today.
I'm very honored. Thank you.
Your Outlander series has sold over 50 million copies. It's published in 43 countries and 39 languages, and every one of the Outlander books has made the New York Times bestseller list. So let's get with it.
Alrighty.
So talk to us a little bit about when you made the decision to take a shot at writing a novel, because statistically, the odds were that you weren't going to succeed.
Well, I didn't actually care whether I succeeded at that point. I just wanted to see if I could write a novel. I'd known from about the age of 8 that I was supposed to be a novelist, but I didn't know how. And I came from a very conservative family background. My parents were Kennedy Democrats, so not conservative that way, but to just, culturally, you might say. Anyway, my father was fond of saying to me, "You're such a poor judge of character, you're bound to marry some bum. So be sure you get a good education so you can support your children." And so with this going on at home, I thought perhaps I would not announce that I wanted to write novels, since even at that age I understood that it was not of the most financially sound. Okay, that'll work. Thanks. Okay, good, yes. That better? Okay, great. All right, yeah. So I was not going to tell my father that I wanted to be a novelist, and so I went into science. I liked science, I was good at it, but I knew I was supposed to be a novelist. When I turned 35, I said, Mozart was dead at 36, maybe you better get a move on here. And so I said, okay, on my next birthday, I'm going to start writing a novel for practice, to learn how. Because up to this point, I had written everything, including Walt Disney comic books, a lot of scientific software, commentary, scholarly papers and textbooks and things like that. My first scientific publication was an 800-page book entitled, well, it was a monograph, entitled The Dietary Habits of the Birds of the Colorado River Valley. And it just got worse from there. But anyway, so I said, well, nobody's ever shown me how to write grant proposals or software reviews or even comic books. I just read a lot of them, and when I thought I had it figured out, I tried it myself. And if it didn't look quite right, I poked it till it did. I said, I assume writing a novel would be the same. The best way to write a novel is to write a novel. So I said, okay, what kind of novel am I going to write for practice? It wasn't a real problem because I was never going to show it to anyone. I was just, writing it to learn how. So I said, what's the easiest kind of novel I could write? And I thought, well, for me, probably a historical novel, because I was a research professor. I knew my way around the library. I had access to the International Library Loan System. This was a long time before the internet even happened, so, it was libraries. And so I said, fine, okay, historical fiction, I always like that. If I turn out to have no imagination, I can steal things from the historical record, which works really well. And so I said, fine, okay, what's a good place and time? So I was thinking about it and thinking, well, American Civil War, World War II, all these rife with conflict and drama and all that. And I happened in this mental muddle to see a really old Doctor Who rerun on public television. Okay, how many people know who Doctor Who is? Okay, for those who don't, the Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey who travels through space and time having adventures, and along the way he picks up companions from different periods of Earth's history because he likes Earthlings. They have a good sense of humor. And in this particular episode, which is a really old one, filmed at least 60 years ago, he had picked up a young Scotsman, and this was a young man named Jamie McCrimmon who appeared in his kilt. And I said, well, that's kind of fetching. And I found myself thinking about this the next day. in church, and I said to myself, well, I don't claim divine revelation, but I was in church. And I said, well, you want to write a book. It doesn't really matter where you set it. The important thing is pick a point and get started. Fine, Scotland, 18th century. So that's where I began, knowing nothing about Scotland or the 18th century, having no outline, no characters, and no plot. But, I at least had a time and a place. That seemed like enough. So that's where I began. And so I began immediately in the library, but I began writing immediately, too. Because at this point, I had the acquaintance of quite a large number of writers, many of whom were writing historical fiction, whereas what they were really doing was reading books about the historical period that they were in love with. Because, there's always more research that you could do, and they were of the school that is convinced that you must do all of your research first. I was of the school that you should write the book, and then make sure the research worked. But so I said, okay, we're just going to start writing the book, and I will do the research at the same time. I don't write in a straight line, and I don't work with an outline, which probably facilitated that approach. But a lot of success in writing lies in figuring out how your own brain works and working with it rather than against it. If any of you have been through the public school system, and I can tell that a lot of you have, excuse me. You were probably told, well, you must given assignments like, well, you must have an outline. You must start with a topic sentence. You must have a topic paragraph. You must make, the Roman numerals and then the English numerals, the Arabic numerals, and then you must fill out your outline and have a concluding paragraph. And then you must make a rough draft of your paper, and you must compare it with your outline and make sure you have everything. Then you must write a polished draft. Then you must have your parents check it, and then you can fix all of the errors and hand it in. Well, I go and give talks periodically to elementary and high schools, and whenever we hit this point in a talk, I say to the teacher, would you mind turning your back for a minute? And they do. And I say, okay, your teacher can't see you now, so tell me the truth. When you get this kind of assignment, outline, etc., how many of you just write the damn paper and fake up the rest of it? About half of them will raise their hands. Because this is a great unhidden secret, is that half the people in the world don't think in a straight line. And I am one of them. The other half do think in a straight line, and the rest of us kind of work around you all. But either way works. It does not matter a bit whether you outline your book. I know writers who have wall charts with the type of peanut butter and the shoe size of their characters. If this is what helps you write, more power to you. This would not help me in the slightest. And so I just began writing. So I said, well, I must have a man in a kilt. This is what the story is about, more or less. So I started, just with a little half-page scene in which the nameless man in a kilt was having a brief argument with his sister about how to make hare pie, which I did because I had to start somewhere. And I had a Scottish cookbook with recipes from the 18th century, which is where I decided to set it. And for making a hare pie, the first step is, joint the hare, take it apart, skin it, clean it, etc. The second one is smash the collops with a hammer. You lay out your pieces and you just whack them very hard with a meat mallet. And the reason for this is that back in the 18th century, you did not bone your meat before you put it in a pie. You cooked it, cracked bones and all. You crack the bones because you want the marrow to leak out into the pie, which will give it a very nice, rich flavor, and also you need all the calories you can get. So people just ate their pies very carefully and took out the bones as they ate. Yeah, so anyway, I thought that was fascinating, so that's what we were doing. His sister was asking him to, smash the collops for her. And so he was. Anyway, that's all that was to it, but it was words on paper. It was also a revelation because I was putting down the ingredients for a hare pie out of my recipe book. And when I had written down, she was telling him what was going in the hare pie. And at the end of that sentence, I put in the square brackets that I would use for a bibliographic citation, Mrs. McClintock's 18th century, etc. And I paused and I said, wait a minute, this is fiction. You don't have to do that. It's the most freeing thing ever. And so that kind of turned me loose. Anyway, I was looking through all kinds of things, doing research on Scotland in the 18th century, but I kept writing. And about the third day of writing, I said, well, I must have a lot of Scotsmen because of the kilt factor, but I think it would be a good idea if I had a female character to kind of play off these guys. And so about the third day of writing, I said, all right, we're going to introduce a female character here. Let's see, we're working with the Jacobite Rebellion, which appears to me at that point to have been Scots versus English. So if I make her an English woman, we will have lots of conflict. So I loosed her into a cottage full of Scots to see what we would do. And she walked in, and they all turned around and stared at her. I was thinking, why does she look funny? What's going on? And one of them stood up, and he said, my name's Dougal Mackenzie, and who might you be? And without my stopping to think, I just wrote, my name's Claire Elizabeth Beauchamp, and who the hell are you? And I said, you don't sound at all like an 18th century person. So I fought with her for the rest of the page, trying to beat her into shape and make her talk like an 18th century person. But she wasn't having any. She just kept making smart-ass modern remarks. And so I said, all right, and you go ahead and be modern. I'll figure out how you got there later. So it's all her fault that there is time travel in these books. So, anyway, that's how I started.
So I actually had a number of misconceptions. You've just explained one of them. I had assumed that Diana was of Scottish heritage, had spent a lot of time in Scotland, loved Scotland, and none of that turned out to be true. Just amazing.
Well, I'd never been to Scotland. But
Another incorrect assumption that I made when I got into these books was that your primary motivation when you started writing must have been to write a time travel novel. But that really wasn't the case at all. It became a time travel novel somewhat out of necessity.
yeah, no, it was just that this particular character was obviously not from this time. So, something had to give. It was either her or time. And she was present, and, time is malleable.
Yeah.
As for Scottish stuff, we were talking ahead of time on my mental checklist before going on stage is to ask my interviewer if they know how to pronounce my name. And I knew, of course, that Hal already did because we had dinner together last night. But it was on my list, so I said, I know you know how to pronounce my name, and he, of course, pronounced it. But I have had various attempts on my name made all over the place. But a few years after my books came out, I was in Scotland, and I stopped at a bookstore, went inside, and I usually go to where my books would be, and if they have any, I find the manager and say, would you like me to sign my books? And they always do. So anyway, I did this in this occasion, and the manager was very excited, and he said, oh, we're so pleased to have you. Your books are very popular. And I said, I'm really thrilled to see that. I'm even more thrilled that you filed them in the Scottish literature section. And he looked at me and he said, well, Gabaldon is such an odd name. We thought it might quite well be Scottish. It is, in fact, a Hispanic name. And were we speaking Spanish, it would be Gabaldon, which is why there's a long O in the last syllable, and it's Gabaldon in English. Just in case you were wondering.
So you touched upon this briefly a few moments ago, but among the world primary writers, leading writers today, almost everyone falls into one of two categories. You have the Ken Folletts and the R.K. Rawlings, who are meticulous outliners. They really write a roadmap of everywhere they intend to go in the book and when they intend to go and how they intend to get there.
Yeah, more power to them.
Yeah. And then you have, you have yourself. You have the Steve Kings, the Lee Childs, the Greg Isles, who just, in the field they're known as pantsters, meaning they write by the seat of their pants. They start, and wherever the story goes, or they just go along and keep it moving along. So you're not a plotting outliner.
It would not be fun if I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. So you've written 9 books that have now been published. You're now working on the 10th in the Outlander series, with none of them having been previously outlined.
No.
Can give us a feel for how and your books are fairly long. They're just wonderful reads. How do you go about the task of going from cover to cover in a single book without a word written in outline as to where you're going to go? It's kind of a let her rip and see where it goes.
Well, it's not quite that bad. I am, in fact, a very slow writer. But what it is that I think in shapes rather than in outline as describing what is going to happen. I can see the shape of what has to happen, but that doesn't mean I know what the specifics are. I just know it's shaped like this, and eventually I will write one like that. But the way it works is that what I need for any given day is what I call a kernel, a line of dialogue or a visual image, anything I can see or sense concretely. And then I will write down a sentence describing whatever that is. And then I start working on it with the front part of my brain, which is the analytical part. And that one is saying, you have too many adjectives. Maybe you could cut this in the middle and make 2 sentences. No, maybe you should do something else. And the back part of my brain is kicking through the compost back there and saying, well, what time of day is it? What's going on here? Is there someone else in the room with you? And things like that. And so gradually I will evolve, from one sentence into a paragraph. And by the end of that paragraph, I know where we are and who's there, and it will kind of carry on. It's still very slow, just a bit at a time. But, occasionally when people start talking, I can hear them, and the dialogue usually goes quite fast. And then sometimes I'll go back and tidy it up a little bit because I will have reiterated something. But usually the dialogue is very organic. The other stuff is very, very slow to, fit together. As I was explaining to a reporter this morning, I said the difference between writing screenplays, which I do on occasion for the show, and writing novels is in the business. The dialogue works pretty much the same way, except that you have much less of it in a script than you do in a novel. But I used to write comic books for Walt Disney, and those work very much like screenplays. You have so many little boxes, and you, as the writer, tell what's going to happen in those boxes. Who are the people present, or the Mickey Mouse and his nephew, or whatever, present, and then what little dialogue balloon that says what they say. Okay, and you have to be sure that the dialogue and the visual images are balanced. The visual images take up most of the room, but the dialogue has to be to the point, because that's actually telling part of the story. The rest of the story is being told completely visually, and that's what they're doing when they make a show, a TV movie, or just television. And once you start looking at it analytically, you can see it very easily. Most people are just watching it, for entertainment, and they don't really notice. But when you're writing the script, you do it the same way as with a comic book. It's your job to say, we want a close-up here on so-and-so's face, or we want a long shot across the British camp in the distance, and there should be a marsh in front of it, things like that. But you don't have to be careful about the writing in that. You just say, there should be a marsh in front of it. You don't need to care whether that's an elegant sentence or not, because it's just going to be the various crew members who are interpreting that. They're saying, okay, how can we do a marsh? Well, that's easy, VFX, no problem, and that sort of stuff. And the dialogue we're very careful with, but even there, the dialogue is being interpreted by the actors, and they will provide all of the subtlety and nuance. When you're writing a novel, you have to explain, if it's important, how someone said something. There's a big difference whether someone says something important quietly or forcefully while banging his fist on the table, or over his shoulder as he's leaving the room. And that you leave to the actors to interpret how best to do that. Whereas in a novel, I have to write that very carefully so that the adverbs and things don't get in the way. In fact, most of that stuff should be invisible to a reader, but it's there, and they will create their own visual pictures using that.
But unlike a comic book, your books are long. They hang together beautifully. The continuity is crisp, and it flows beautifully. And when I realized, from having followed you very closely, that all 9 books were written without an outline, without a roadmap, just propelling the story as it occurs to you, I began to read the books differently. And as an example, something that kind of fascinated me, in the first Outlander book, Claire, everyone here knows who Claire is, Claire realizes that she's been called in for questioning by Blackjack Randall. And he's a mean guy, and people have a great fear of him. But she's an English subject, so he can do that. And one of the clansmen that she's with at the time, he tells her, there's a way you can get out of having to be questioned by Blackjack Randall. All you'd have to do is marry a Scotsman, marry a member of the clan. Then he really couldn't just call you in for questioning. So we think you ought to consider marrying Jamie Fraser in the book. And at first she's taken back by the very thought, but then she also realizes she doesn't have much choice. It's either that or Black Jack Randall. So they finally say, are you willing to marry Jamie? And you say, or Claire says, yes, I will do that. And they turn to Jamie and they say, are you willing to marry Claire? He says, yeah, he doesn't give it any thought at all. He's willing to do that. But then you have Claire say, does it bother you, Jamie, that I'm not a virgin? To which he replies, well, no, so long as it doesn't bother you that I am. So my question, as a writer of an unoutlined novel, when did you make the decision that this dashing, wonderful character, Jamie Fraser, was going to be a virgin at this point in the book?
Well, that had something to do with the way I write books, but also that I write slowly, and also that I know a lot of writers and so forth. I've been connected with something called the Literary Forum for 35 years, which is about how long I've been writing the books. And, you know, it's not a writer's group or a critique group or anything like that. It's just people who like books. There are some writers there, and a lot of people who aren't, but like to talk to writers or like to talk about books. And, you know, it's a really relaxing, nice place to go and hang out. So I'd been there for several years before I began writing Outlander, and at first I was not going to tell anyone what I was doing. But one night I found myself having a back and forth argument with a gentleman online about what it feels like to be pregnant. And, and he said, oh, I know what that's like. My wife's had 3 children. And I laughed. And I said, yeah, Buster, I've had 3 children. And he said, well, can you tell me what it's like? I said, I can, yes, but it's kind of complex. I have this short scene that I wrote a few months ago in which a young woman tells her brother what it's like to be pregnant in some detail because he's curious. You know, he's young, never been with a pregnant woman, so to speak. And so I said, I'll put that scene in the library here and you can read it. So everyone who'd been following the argument went and read that scene, and they came rushing back, and they said, well, this is great, what is it? And I said, I don't know, and so I didn't. And they said, well, this is great, you know, put up some more of it. And, you know, the idea that someone would actually want to read what I had written, well, this is just the most intoxicating thing ever. And so, you know, I started putting up more, you know, when I had a scene that would stand by itself. I should mention, you know, in reference to what you were saying earlier about how the novel flows, it does when it's finished. I don't write in a straight line. I write where I can see things happening. And so I'll have hundreds of single scenes, which then fit together. As I say, I think in shapes. It's like playing Tetris in my head, but very slowly. Yeah, so anyway, when I finished a scene, if I know what happens next, I'll write that. But in this case, I've lost my thread of thought, but it will come back momentarily. What was the last thing I said? Oh, yes, the pregnancy thing and so forth. Yeah, so everyone wanted to see more of what I was writing. And so I put up more, you know, like every 2 or 3 months I'd put up a scene. And people got more and more interested. And they began, you know, asking me questions, what kind of book is this? And I said, I don't know. It's historical, sort of. But, you know, given that one of the main characters is a time traveler, obviously it's not totally historical. But, so they began speculating, what kind of book could this be? And this was based on handfuls of scenes. And so some of them said, well, that's a really, really good sex scene that you wrote. Maybe you're writing a romance novel. And I said, well, I don't know. I've never read a romance novel, which I had not at that point. That it might be, for all I know. So I went to the grocery store and picked out 3 New York Times bestselling romance novels. Figured these must be representative of the genre. And so I took them home and read them. They were all immensely entertaining, especially the one in which the hero threw the heroine across the table, flipped up her skirts, and then courteously waited a moment to allow her to adjust to his size. And I'm thinking, yeah, how small was he? Yeah, well, give or take a few things. Anyway, in all 3 of those novels, which, as I say, were well written, I read them all, you know, first to last, and very entertaining. But in every single one of them, the heroine was much younger than the hero and was noticeably a virgin until she got raped somewhere in the mid-book. And so I said, well, I don't think I'm writing a romance exactly. So, you know, what kind of book is this? And I had no idea the thing about the virgins had kind of stuck in my mind. And I was thinking, well, as I'm not writing a romance, why don't we let him be the virgin? So that's where that came from.
So, in most time travel books, the traveler knows as soon as he arrives wherever he's traveling to that he's spanned time, place, sometimes centuries. In Outlander, when Claire time travels, she doesn't immediately know that she's in another time and place. I thought you really handled that wonderfully. She discovers it as the day goes on, as time travels. And I was very taken with how she determined that she was no longer in the 20th century. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when she discovered that, but the reason that it works that way is because I had no idea, of anything either. So she was discovering it along with me. And this is an ideal thing for what you'd call a quest story. Or a fish out of water story. This is where someone arrives in a strange place and they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what's going on, which allows them to ask questions and be curious and poke into things, which in turn allows the reader to learn what they need to learn about the surroundings without you being obvious about it and hitting them over the head with all the facts. This is what you do not want to do, is info dump on your readers first thing. So you just gradually feed them little facts, and that's a real good way to do it.
Yeah, well, what I was referring to specifically that I thought was so really beautifully handled in the book is that she winds up in the countryside during the day. She runs across these clansmen. She's with them. Night falls, and she looks off to where Inverness would be, and it's pitch black. And that doesn't make sense, because it's a fairly large town, and she knows she's not that far away. And she realizes that there's no electricity in the world. So she discovers that she has time traveled. I thought that was just a fabulous touch in the book. Now, I think most readers, or many readers, assume that beautiful descriptions just roll out of a writer's imagination, well, because they're writers, and that's what they're supposed to do. But it is a process to get a description so that it's just what the writer wants the reader to see. Can you talk about that a little bit, just how you go through that process of finalizing a description?
Yeah. Well, this kind of goes back to what I said about needing a kernel to start writing. This is one of the places I get my kernels. If I am having what I call a cold day, which is where I knew how to write yesterday, today I don't have a clue, and I have nothing going, I don't have a scene in progress, my mind is a blank. Where am I going to start? I look for a kernel, and in this case, something concrete. It can be anything, as long as I can write a few words about it. So, say for the sake of argument, I picked up one of my old Sotheby's catalogs with Scottish crystal and silver and flipped through this looking for a good object about which I could write a few words. That can be my kernel for the day. So I picked this crystal goblet, which had Jacobite thistles incised in the glass. And I said, okay, this is Scottish, this looks fine. So I set it in front of my mind's eye and decided to begin writing a description. Okay, so I write the crystal goblet, Well, no, the crystal goblet by itself is not all that interesting. The first question I usually ask myself when I'm stuck is, where is the light coming from? Where is the light falling? So I think, well, where is the light falling here? Oh, it's coming in from the right. I can see it. So I'm writing, the light fell through the crystal goblet. I'm thinking, well, no, there's something about that light. Oh, it's blue. The light is blue. The blue light fell through it feels cold. The cold blue light fell through the crystal goblet already. It's beginning to take shape. Why is the light blue? It's winter. There's snow outside. It's reflecting off the snow. That's why it's blue. Okay, so the cold blue light of a winter afternoon. It's just going to go down there. and fell through the goblet. Well, it fell through the goblet? That doesn't sound right. What, it just hit at the goblet and then went splat on the table? No, that's not right. Okay, it passed through the goblet. That's better. Okay, the cold blue light of a winter afternoon. Is it a late winter afternoon? Is it? No, it's not. The light is coming in low. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's not late, or it would be purple, the light. And so it's not that, but do I want to get late in there? The late blue light of a cold winter afternoon. No, that isn't graceful at all. No, it's got to be cold blue light of a mid-afternoon winter. No, certainly not. Leave that alone. Cold blue light of a winter afternoon will do. Okay, the cold blue light of a winter afternoon passed through the crystal goblet. We're still sticking with the crystal goblet. Crystal is important because I can see that. Okay, it passed through the crystal goblet. Okay, and then what? Was the light still blue? Well, no, it's not. It's not. I can see the light. It's sort of amber colored. Okay, so the cold blue light of a winter afternoon passed through the crystal goblet and, did what? I mean, it didn't just go splat on the table. We've already established that. What would it do? It would bend. It would refract. So it's kind of, off to the side. Okay, well, it landed on the table plainly because I can see it. Okay, the cold blue light of a late winter afternoon, it is the late winter afternoon, passed through the crystal goblet and cast, not a shadow, cast a warm light. I don't want to use light twice in a row. And cast a pool of amber light, that's better, and cast a pool of amber light on the, what is it sitting on? It's on a table. Oh, well, if it wasn't a polished table, I wouldn't be able to see that reflection. Okay, and passed the cold blue light of an early winter afternoon, that's it. The cold blue light of an early winter afternoon passed through the crystal goblet and cast a pool of amber light on the polished wood of the tabletop. There we are, okay. And now I know where I am. I'm in Jocasta Cameron's parlor.
That's how it's done.
Thank you. And I know that because the light is amber because the glass is full of whiskey. And Jocasta Cameron's the only person who would have a Jacobite glass full of whiskey in this story. so this is how it works. I mean, it's slow, but it works.
So the Battle of Culloden is an important part of the book. And it's an important part of history. It actually is the last pitched battle that has taken place to this day on British soil or Scottish soil. So the third book, Voyager, opens really with the aftermath of the Battle of Culloden. But in the series that has been platformed and streamed, I'm sure a number of you people have seen it, it is a really authentic, gruesome battle. And actually, about 2,000 Jacobite Scots lost their lives in the Battle of Culloden. It's an important piece of history. You commented when you finally got around to visiting Scotland, you commented on the fact that when you walked on the fields of Culloden, you felt that you were on haunted ground. Can you explain a little bit about what the impression of being on that battlefield that you had written about meant to you?
Yeah, almost everyone who goes there has that sensation. And it's because it is a battlefield like Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. I don't know if any of you have ever walked that. I walk battlefields a lot, and they don't all feel like that. But those two do, Gettysburg and Culloden, and they feel like that for the same reason. A large number of men stood still for several hours, their weapons in their hands, knowing they were going to die. And they're still there. Sorry.
No, I'm sure there are many people in this room who have walked the fields of Gettysburg and know exactly what you're experiencing and have felt the same thing. Let's talk a little bit about the series that's now, I believe, the ninth.
No, we are finishing filming the seventh season.
Seventh season, correct.
Yes, and for those who have not yet heard the news, we have the 8th season greenlit. Thank you. We also are greenlit for a prequel about Jamie Fraser's parents. Yes, which will be based on the book that I am writing at the moment, along with book 10.
So were you thrilled with the casting of Katrina Balfe and Sam Heughan in the roles that they
I
had?
was, yes, absolutely. I was, fascinated and apprehensive. I'd never been involved in a film production before at all. And, to have, such important characters, I was not sure. Fans have been, fan casting the eventual movie, as they put it, for years and years and years. And I have seen, 10 million horrible suggestions for, mostly for Jamie, but occasionally Claire as well. So I was not sure just what was going to happen. But luckily, we have excellent casting directors. Suzanne Smith and her partner are both just fabulous. So it was about 4 days after they began casting when I got a call from Meryl Davis, the executive producer, and she said, "We're so excited, we found Jamie." And I said, "What, really, already?" Because we thought that was going to be almost impossible. And she confided to me that she had thought that they'd search and search until the last minute, and finally he would turn out to be the UPS man. But but in fact, she said, "No, this actor named Sam Heughan," and she told me about him, and I said, "What color is his hair?" She says, "Well, it's black right now, but it's dyed. He's really blonde." And I said, "Oh, that's good. His skin tone will be fine for red hair and all that, because people who do have really dark hair just don't look right when you dye it red." And she said, "We have his audition tapes. Can I email them to you?" And I said, "Yes, I'm in a car on my way to Santa Fe, but I'll look at them as soon as I get there." So I did, with some trepidation, because I didn't know what I was about to see. Anyway, it comes on, and it's this nice enough looking young man with black slicked over hair and so forth, but a good expression on his face. And then he began to talk, and 5 seconds later, Sam was gone, and it was Jamie right there. I was going, I'd never seen anything like that. And, it was my Jamie right there. As he was using lines from the book, of course, for the audition, but he spoke them exactly the way that I heard Jamie speak them and so forth. And I talked to Sam afterward, and I said, "What kind of preparation did you do for this?" He said, "I just read the book." And he said, I have a gut feel for the guy. And he still does, but it works. Yeah, and then it took another 4 months to find Katrina, and we were right up to the very deadline when they needed to start filming in 3 days. And to do that, that means assembling a crew of over 250 people, having sets and trailers and everything. And yet we couldn't go on without a leading lady, so that was a big holdup. So what they did, this show is financed by Sony Productions and distributed by Starz, so both those entities have a say in who gets cast. So the executives from both of those made a little collection of videotapes and gave them to all of the other executives connected with the shows, and said, "We have to find a Claire amongst these videos. These are the most promising ones that we have after months and months of searching. Go home, look at them this afternoon or over the weekend, and pick one. We need to start shooting on Monday." So they all came back on Sunday night, and every single one of them said, "Well, I don't know. There's it's only one line, and but there's just something about this one." And every single one of them had picked Katrina. Yeah, on the single line, "Stop! Help! He's going over." Spoken in a nice British accent, mind you. And so that is how we had Claire. As she said, 3 days later, I was in Glasgow. She told me she had to run out and rent a storage locker and throw everything she owned into it and take off for Glasgow. So, yeah, so it was all very exciting, yeah.
So film is obviously a very different art form than a published book. And there are almost always deviations in a film portrayal of a story as compared to
Yes, there are.
to the written book. How did you deal with that?
Well, fortunately, the terms of my negotiated contract call for me to be a consultant. And I asked my agent, "What does that actually mean? What do they expect me to do?" And he said, "Well, probably nothing. It's just a means of getting you some more money." But but it depends on what kind of relationship you have with them or develop with them. In some instances, a writer will work well with them, and they will actually consult you. In others, they just want the author to stay out of their way. In that case, you just cash your checks and all that. So I said, "Okay, I want to be involved." So I made sure to be extremely friendly. And I would have been anyway, and they're very nice people and very good to work with. But that means, as a consultant, they show me everything. They show me all of the scripts and all of the iterations of the scripts. Each script goes through at least 8 different rewrites before they even start shooting, and then through 2 or 3 more while they're shooting it. Because, Just some things change. They can't get a location that they need for this particular scene, so they have to take that out. And do we put in a new scene, or do we just tighten it up here? This speech isn't working. Can we ditch that and start over with something else? Things like that. And so there's a writer's room, which does the scripts en masse, so to speak. They decide what should be in each episode, and then one single screenwriter actually writes that episode, but using all of the beats, as they call them, which are, the specific episodes, specific actions or lines or business that we must have in this scene. And that flexes and changes all the time. So I see all of that, and I get to comment on it. About half the time they listen to me, and the other half they don't, which is their prerogative. But they also send me all of the daily footage that they shoot, which is fascinating to watch people go through take after take after take and watch it get usually better and better the more they do it. In some cases, it gets really worse, and the actors get silly and start laughing in between their takes. Sometimes they start laughing during the takes. There was the one scene in Paris during the second episode when they are with Bonnie Prince Charlie, and he's complaining that his mistress's pet has bitten him, and he's showing it to Claire, and they'll have their heads together over his hand, and then Claire looks up and says, "Is this bite by any chance from a monkey?" And every single time she said from a monkey, they all both went, "Ah!" and lost it completely, and they had to skip it and come back to it later because they could not say it with a straight face. And I don't know why that one, but because there are a lot of funnier ones that they give. But anyway, it works like that. So I may consult. I also get to tell them what I think about the dailies, because when it's in that shape, they can do different things about it. Usually they won't ditch something completely unless I say, this is totally wrong and this is why. Usually they say, but nobody knows that but you, and go on and do it anyway. But otherwise, I do get input. And, sometimes they will say something, they'll do something that is, just totally wrong, and I will fight about it. In the first season, the final episode, where it's Blackjack and Jamie in the prison, and there's their first, confrontation in prison, which is obviously going to escalate or, fall apart, as the case may be. Anyway, the screenwriter, who was a very old-time screenwriter, wonderful guy, does beautiful work, but in this, he was one of the people who thought, well, the book is the book, the show is the show, I'm the show, I'm going to write this the way I think it should be. And so he had Blackjack Randall professing his love for Jamie and inviting him to escape together and go and live as lovers on the continent. And I'm going, no. Said, no, that's not what happens at all. Anyway, I wrote back to Merrill and I said, I don't use language bad enough to tell you how much I hate this. And anyway, that actually made them pay attention. And there was a considerable fight about it for several days. But luckily, Sam and Tobias were both on my side too, so they didn't like it either. And so they did change it. Yeah, so sometimes I win, sometimes I don't, but I do get to say, and they do let me write a script occasionally. They'll ask me, do you want to write a script this season? And if I say I do, which I usually do, then they'll give me one toward the end.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Just a show of hands, how many people have seen some or all of the Outlander series? So Jamie and Claire are fantastic characters, beautifully cast. But when you think about the series, it seemed like everyone in it was beautifully cast.
They are. They do fantastic jobs with the secondary characters as well as the main cast. They're just fabulous. I mean, they found Tobias, who was the best Blackjack ever, and also Dominique Pillon, who was playing Master Raymond, perfect in the role. Yeah. But it's continued this season that we're shooting right now, which is season 7. It's during the American Revolution, the battles of Saratoga, and they have a fabulous actor named Hal. Rod Hallett is his name, but he's playing Benedict Arnold, and he is just fabulous at that. Claire meets him, and they have this wonderful conversation, and as they're parting, she says, well, thank you, and then pauses and said, I'm sorry, I don't know your rank. And he said, what must you think of a man who bursts into your presence and doesn't bother to introduce himself? He kisses her hand and says, Major General Benedict Arnold, your most humble servant, ma'am, and goes off. And she's standing there. And Jimmy says, are you well, Claire? You look like you're about to fall over. And she says, I might. But Benedict Arnold was, in fact, a very charming, educated man. And she tells Jamie in the book, she says, and I liked him. And he said, everybody likes him. And they did. You know, he was very popular with his men. He was a wonderful general. He did not get along well with Horatio Gates, who was the main commander of that army. And that is essentially what caused him to change sides, was Gates' refusal to mention Arnold and his actions in any of his dispatches. He wouldn't give him any credit for, you know, the very heroic things that he did. And Arnold finally says, well, fooey on this, I'm not getting anywhere. I'll go and talk to the British. And he did, and you all know what happened after that. But anyway, Rod just captures him beautifully. I found him on Twitter, and I sent him a tweet that said, very nice, General. You know? And he wrote back and said, very nice, DG.
So we are sadly out of time.
Oh, that's too bad. I was having a good time.
Diana, thank you so much for
it's my
doing
pleasure.
what you do so well.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Hal.